Hey, familia. Welcome to In Your Business with Dr. Alex, where we get all up in your health and your business. And we are talking with Penny Chiasson today, and we're going to be doing hypnosis, mindset, and identity for peak performance, and learning so much about hypnosis and what this wonderful woman does with her practice and how she helps others. So if this is the first time that you are watching, definitely this is interactive. So leave comments in the chat. We give you a shout out, ask questions. If you have questions about hypnosis or peak performance, identity, breaking through the ceiling, whatever it is, excuse me. Definitely leave those in the chat. And we're streaming to YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and it's going to be an audio, it's going to be podcast. So if you're live, hashtag replay is just as good. So always feel free to leave your questions as we're going. Let us know where in this whole wide world that you are tuning in from. And I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mr. Eric McKee. He is a realtor here in Northeast Ohio. So definitely contact him if you have any realty needs. But we thank him for being a sponsor to this show. I'm going to put his info up. And we thank him so much. So without further ado, I want to bring up my beautiful guest, Miss Penny Chiasson. Hi, Miss Penny.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm so So Penny, where are you joining us from? Where in this whole wide world are you?
I am in a small town by the name of Philadelphia, Mississippi. So
I didn't
it's
even know there
about,
was a Philadelphia, Mississippi.
it's about 90 miles northeast of Jackson. So very rural.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So I'm tuning in from Ohio today, and it is cold and rainy and cloudy, but I'm trying not to look like it's cold and rainy and cloudy outside. So, oh my goodness. So we have a New Jersey in the house right here. Miss Keisha, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Feel free to drop any questions. This is interactive. And as we get into it, we will be happy to answer any of your questions. So Miss Penny, tell us a little bit about you and your work and about hypnosis, because I feel like, and I kind of maybe want to put this out here first. I feel like sometimes people think about hypnosis, they think about the little clock and laying back and falling asleep and then being told what to do and all of that. So hopefully we can kind of demystify all of that through today's episode. And tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you got into the line of work that you do now.
Oh, wow. This is a loaded question. I've always been in a field of helping people. And my very first foray into helping was becoming a registered nurse. And through that process, ended up traveling across country, met my husband, and a part of a healing journey within myself began. And I think as entrepreneurs, people who own business, there is an aspect to that for pretty much all of us. So as I began that healing journey, I became a nurse anesthetist, and I found out about Reiki and some other things. And if I had been in Mississippi back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I probably wouldn't have heard about those things, right? But it's more openly accepted in Connecticut. I worked at a hospital where they had a CHI center, the Center for Healthcare Integration. And I would give anesthetics to patients who came in and they had had healing touch prior to surgery. They had done Reiki. They had done these things and they took less anesthesia. They woke up more quickly. They were more comfortable. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. And it was just kind of an anecdote for me, right? And then one day I thought, you know what? I just want to know what this Reiki thing is. So I took a Reiki class, and it's really funny because in the Reiki class, the instructor has us all hold hands, and she looks at me. I was to the right of her. She goes, go ahead, send your energy around the circle. And I'm sitting there going, what in the hell are you talking about, lady?
Like what? Yeah.
Because I walked in with no knowledge. I was just kind of open to it. And it kind of began as a curiosity. And as we all know in healthcare, I mean, people are very aware of the fentanyl crisis and the opioid epidemic and what's happening right now. But, you know, even back then, there would be issues. And I thought to myself, you know what, knowing what I know as a nurse anesthetist, there are things I have learned about pain management that if I had known as a nurse, I could have taken much better care of my patients. They could have been more comfortable. So I just, on a whim, decided I'm going to start a continuing education program for acute pain management for nurses. And in the research, that was when I discovered the actual medical literature on hypnosis. And I thought, now this is really interesting. So I kind of tabled it. It was in the back of my mind. I played with it. And in 2012, I came across a course that was taught by a retired nurse anesthetist. Because for me, that education, that background, like I wanted to understand the science behind it, as you said, not just the waving of the pocket watch. Like I wanted the science. And again, it was out of curiosity. I took that training. And this was the pivotal moment in everything that I do in the training. On the fourth or fifth day, they demonstrate something called glove analgesia. Now, if you want to know how powerful your mind is, it's where you use hypnotic suggestion to block pain. And I got called up to be the person that was demonstrated on.
Oh, wow.
And I had seen the video on the website where he demonstrates it. And I just kept telling myself, okay, you can't overthink this. Just follow his instructions. And that's the key to hypnosis, right? That's your mind. Just follow the instructions. And if you're not familiar with healthcare, there's something called an Alice clamp, and it's a surgical clamp. You can use it to pinch the skin and hold the skin. He clamped one of those shut on the back of my hand. And I heard the snap and I never felt a thing.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was like, oh, this is not curiosity. I have to tell the world about this. So that's kind of what put the wheels in motion that led to me being where I am today. But it was a combination of that curiosity, following like, this is different. Let me see what's here, trusting myself to do that, and being on my own personal healing journey. And, you know, just as like a personal aside, I'm a simple person, not really materialistic. I love my rural lifestyle and that kind of thing. But, you know, I love working with people who are movers and shakers. And that's really kind of how I've gotten to where I am. It's been an evolution. I never allowed myself to get in a box and stay in that box. When I felt like it's time to move in a direction, I've just kind of followed it. So that's kind of who I am. I don't stay in one place, so to speak, very long.
Yeah. So, and I know that you and I had kind of talked before, and you can feel free to share as much or as little as you'd like, but I know that we both personally talked when we had met before about burnout from healthcare, from traditional healthcare, and being burnt out from the model that we have now and everything that we've been exposed to. So how did you, because I know that you use some of this hypnosis to kind of work through your own burnout. And I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that a little bit, because I know that there's probably a lot of people listening that are in that space, that overwhelmed, burnt out space, and how hypnosis can really help with this, or how you used it. I think sometimes it's better to use our own examples, like this is how I did it. and maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Exactly. Well, one of the things I realized when I first opened a business was I loved being in business for myself. And the reason why I loved it was because I could help people change their lives according to my values, according to my terms. And that's when I began to realize that there was friction between what I was doing in the healthcare field because the values in healthcare were shifting. And I kind of got it, but I didn't really understand it until going into like 2019. And it really hit me like, this is what's going on here. I can't stay here. It is so misaligned with my values. So, one of the first things that I did was recognize what my values were. And when I was in transition, it's like I knew I had to get out. The environment had become toxic to me. And it was no one or no person, it was the system. I worked with some really wonderful, great people. I just couldn't cope with being in that place anymore. And I was reaching the point where, I could sleep good every night of the week, except for the night before I went into a shift. And when you're working in a level 1 trauma center and people's lives are in your hands, you don't want to be tired. You need to be clear. You need to be focused. And I felt I had a responsibility. So I was like, okay, I have to get out of here, but I can't just quit my job and not have a place to land. So one of the things to tap into my subconscious that I used was to have gratitude for what that job was giving me while I was bridging my way out of it. Because our subconscious mind, it looks for what we focus on. Okay. So I could either be in this place where I focused on how toxic it was and how miserable I was and how limited I felt in helping the people that I cared about, or I could focus on the fact that it was providing insurance so that we were taken care of, that it was providing a schedule that was allowing me to build a business that was aligned. And having that gratitude took me out of the resentment. It took me out of the fear. It took me out of the anger, right? And those things are all subconscious. So we can make conscious decisions that influence our subconscious. And it does that through the reticular activating system, so that we see those things. And that reticular activating system is something that you can tap into every day. As a matter of fact, almost every coach, mindset, spiritual person out there is teaching people how to do that by putting your attention on what it is that you desire. And I was desiring to get out, and I had to have that gratitude for that bridge. Now, for hypnosis, I use a couple of different forms of self-hypnosis. One is a visualization type practice, and then another is based on something called recognitions. And you can think of a recognition like an affirmation, but it's the intention that changes everything. And the intention is to say that statement to yourself while you're in a hypnotic state, which is no different from meditation. Again, it's the intention that's the difference. But when you say this statement to yourself when you're in hypnosis and you say it with conviction, your subconscious mind is going to respond. It's going to mesh with your deep inner beliefs, feelings, thoughts, or it's going to bump up against it. And you're going to have a response to that. It could be something like shifting in your chair, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. You could say that recognition. So I'll just share the first one that I use because it's one that I can share without, guiding someone through the process. It's Delta renews my life, and Delta is a placeholder. So my Delta is the divine consciousness. So divine consciousness renews my life. Now, if I'm having a really bad day and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not feeling this, when I say that to myself in hypnosis, I'm going to get an echo back. This says, no, it's not. Look at your life. Like that could be an echo. Or I could say divine consciousness renews my life. And it's like, yes, the world is opening up for you. Or I could simply be restless. And that's a subconscious response too. So I don't know if that kind of gives you the answer that you were looking for, but I use those recognitions to basically kind of take out the trash at the end of each day. So the frustrations that I dealt with at the end of each day, those recognitions would take out the trash so that it wouldn't build up in my mind underneath the surface.
Mhm. No, I love that. I think that's such a practical thing that people can do and that we don't do enough of because we want to carry, we want to hold everything. And
Yeah.
it builds up and it becomes too heavy. It becomes too toxic. All that toxicity, it just builds up. And no, I think that's a lovely way to think about it that you need to take the trash out at the end of the day. Oh, I think that's like a good quote for today's thing. Like you need,
Yeah.
you need to take the trash out at the end of the day, you really do. And, for myself, one of the things that I did when I would get off of really long shifts in the ICU, I would just go to my car. And even before I turned it on, left the parking lot, did anything, I would just sit there in silence for like a good 10, 15 minutes. And I would just let myself just decompress from the day, from all the noises, the yelling, the beeping, the alarms, everything. I would just, before I even got to go home, because I think a lot of people would you need that time to separate yourself from like your work mode and that persona that you have to like your home persona or whatever role that you play in that other part of your life. And so much of life would just become a big blur for people and unhappiness would all just blur together and the overwhelm and the burnout. And for me, I found that as a really great way for me to have lasted as long as I did in healthcare before I switched and started my own practice. Is that's really what I had to do so much. But I knew a lot of other people were not doing that and it was showing up in their lives. They were really stressed out. They were not doing very well. So yeah.
And you make a really great point there, if I can
Yeah.
just
No, of
carry on
course.
that train of thought. You talk about taking that moment to decompress, to separate that from your everyday life.
Mhm.
Everything that we do, we function off of habit, and that includes the way that we think and we process information. Things can become habit. And I've worked with many business owners who, like us as healthcare providers, working in the ICU, working in anesthesia, your job is to anticipate and to
Mhm.
prevent and avoid,
Yeah.
right? We don't like to be reacting. We like to be proactive, not reactive. So
Mhm.
it influences the way that we see the world, the way that we think. In a lot of business owners, that they're troubleshooting. They're
Mhm.
looking to prevent things. And so it puts you in a mode of looking for the problem. And we think that is a helpful thing. But if we allow that to carry over into our personal life, what can happen is when we're in a state of what if thinking, what if we're telling our amygdala, we're telling our brain we're looking for danger. We need to avoid danger.
Mhm.
And those thoughts activate our stress response. They activate our fear response. And, when you hear people say, a lot of people get really angry when they hear this, but this is just one component of it. So I want to preface this with that. When people say that anxiety is based on fearful thinking, this is what they're talking about. We start looking, we're either looking for a problem so we can avoid it, we're attempting to avoid a situation, we become hypervigilant and our radar is up. But because our radar is processing everything in our life through the lens of, I have to avoid this, I need to avoid this, then we can all of a sudden find ourselves feeling anxious, getting social anxiety, and self-diagnosed stuff, right? People say, oh, I have social anxiety, I can't go on camera anymore. And it's because we run these scenarios through our mind. So, here's another thing that you can do is pay attention to your thinking. Rather
Mhm.
than thinking out of habit, have awareness around your thinking so that when these thoughts pop up, you can go, I don't have to be afraid of being in front of the camera. Like, if I make a mistake and I say something wrong, I can either correct it or just let it be what it is. Everybody makes
Mhm.
mistakes, right?
Mhm.
And we can just go into a reframe and stop that habit of thinking from getting in our way.
Yeah, I can 100% attest to that because I had horrible issues with anxiety. I was on all kinds of medications and I mean it was really bad for a while. And it was when I started being able to self-coach and catch myself, that's when I was able to pretty much reason like I was having panic attacks like at 4 in the morning, like waking me up from sleep. They were so bad. And finally, and I can't go into all the things that I helped me get over it, but one of the things that I do now to like to even prevent any of that is just to catch myself when those thoughts, because we are, just like you said, such creatures of habit, and the routines and the scripts and all of that, they want to keep coming up, and it takes like you have to actively be looking out for those and catching them. And for me, I would catch them, and as soon as they started to want to start going to play mode, I would be like, I put the brakes on it and reframe it and catch myself and bring myself back to reality. Like, what is the reality of the situation? And that has helped with my anxiety so much. Like I said, I can't even remember the
Mhm.
last time I had a panic attack. And they were so bad for me. But it's getting that insight and that awareness, the self-awareness. And I think for anxiety, and you can put it to any number of things, but that's really such a huge thing, is just that, and getting that and being able to do that. But also sometimes you need somebody like Penny, or you need somebody like me to help you be aware and make you able to catch yourself and start identifying those so that you can start doing it, because you're the one that's with yourself 24/7. So you do
Yeah.
have to be able to do that on your own, but it's so important to be able to have somebody help you point that out as well. So I know for me that was like a huge one.
Yeah. And so many times that can come from our past. Like
Mhm.
I was adopted at 2 months old. Then
Mm.
my adoptive parents divorced at 7.
Mhm.
My mother went on to have a couple of more marriages, right? So like stability and relationships were a thing for me growing up. So we can actually have experiences that have framed our reality and our
Mhm.
beliefs around a situation. Um, Someone could have had a teacher in school who scolded them in front of a classroom full of
Mhm.
people. And in that moment, there's a belief that gets laid down. It's like, oh, this
Mhm.
isn't good. I can't speak up in front of people. Somebody might take me down a few pegs. I've
Mhm.
heard that
Mhm.
more than once.
Mhm.
And that one isolated little thing. So you can do this conscious intervention, and you can do the meditation, the journaling, the gratitude, all those things. But yet it still seems like there's a current under the surface, and you can't put your finger on where that current
Mhm.
is, where it's coming from. And that's where I come in, working with the subconscious. That's the difference between
Mhm.
coaching
Mhm.
and working with standard coaching and working with a subconscious coach,
Mhm.
especially someone who can see the patterns of thinking that can emerge over time
Mhm.
in these processes. Now, one of the things that I talk about often is there are ways you can harness the subconscious without necessarily working one on one with the hypnotist, because we're constantly going in and out of states. I just wrapped up a paper last week for the Journal of Hypnotism for the NGH. I'm a quarterly contributor there. And I was wanting to look at the most up to date research on how we define a
Mhm.
hypnotic state, or how we define trance, because you'll hear people say, oh, hypnosis is a theta state. Well, it's correlated to theta brain waves in the brain. Theta doesn't define hypnosis, and hypnosis doesn't necessarily create theta. There's no research to back that up. There's just a correlation. But what they have found is there's no trance per se. People like to call it trance. It's nothing more than a state of focused attention.
Mhm.
That's why when you're driving down the highway, you can get really absorbed into your thoughts, and you lose track of where you're driving, the intersections you're going through, and that type
Totally
of
do.
thing.
I totally do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So this is where you really want to be mindful of your thoughts, because if you are worrying
Mhm.
when you go into that state of absorption, you are giving yourself negative suggestions.
Mm.
So, everybody, if you take nothing else away from this conversation today, when you worry, you are negatively programming your mind. But what this study laid out, they did it was a review article. They looked at all the research out there, and what it shows is that our brainwave state is not static. So what
Mhm.
that means is when we wake up, we don't go into gamma and stay in gamma all day. We don't go into beta or stay in beta all day, or alpha. Our mind is not constantly, but frequently shifting those gears into different states. So we have those subconscious moments throughout the day. If you're going through your day and you're doing something and all of a sudden you have a huge epiphany or an insight or an aha, and you're like, wow, I never thought of that before like that. That is what we call a subconscious moment.
Mm.
If you have emotion bubble up out of nowhere all of a sudden, that is your subconscious saying, here, I'm showing you something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a static state, though a hypnotist can guide you into that state, or you can guide yourself into that state.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So when people come to work with you, are they, I don't know if you can tell me like if there is a percentage or what it is, but do people like already know about hypnosis and that's why they're reaching out to you, or are they curious about it and how it can work for them in their life, or what do you find usually?
Um, in the beginning, a lot of it was curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then I've just kind of stumbled into, connecting with people who already know about hypnosis. They're already using some meditation. Maybe they've listened to some hypnosis audios. They may have even seen another hypnotist before in the past, and we connect. But for a lot of people, they use hypnosis as a last resort. They've tried everything else. And then they just, and fortunately, that tide is turning. But for a lot of people, they're like, well, nothing else has worked. I may as well try hypnosis. And that's really backwards,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you can get into the subconscious and deal with something before it just really kind of absorbs you in your life, you avoid a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, and those types of things. So, yeah, I mean, the internet is changing things immensely in that regard.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Have you had any people that are like naysayers for hypnosis or who are like, mm-mm, that's not real?
Um, I haven't had anyone say that it's not real. There are people out there who believe that it's not in the light. Let's put it that way. They think it's something evil,
Yeah.
right? And it's not my job to convince these people because their beliefs are their truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. I mean, I think it's the intention with which we do anything. Jesus turned water into wine.
Mm-hmm.
Anything used with good intent and responsibly, it is positive, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be negative. Um, where were we going with that? I lost my train. I lost
Oh
my
no,
train
it's
of
okay.
thought.
We were talking about like people thinking that hypnosis is kind of evil or it's not,
Naysayers.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't make it my job to convince people.
Yeah.
If people need convincing, you're really not my ideal client
Right.
because people come to me because they want to move and shake. I'm not going to push and pull and drag somebody across the finish line. Now, that being said, some people are like, I'm not sure this is going to work for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then, like, I have a hypnosis workshop I let people take advantage of that's insight based, because something about insight based, most hypnosis, people are not reading, but they're delivering scripts, or it's hypnosis audios, it's scripted type work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy to say, yeah, I felt great after that, but I'm really not sure anything shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And when I work with clients, I work on an insight based process,
Mm-hmm.
because when we develop insight, our neural pathways become malleable. That neuroplasticity gets activated. And when we have that insight, we've opened the door to lay down a new belief. So usually what I'll do is I have a workshop I'll refer people over to, and then they'll come back to me and they're like, oh my God, like I accomplished things with that hypnosis like I never dreamed was possible. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's all people need.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's great. I love that for you. Right. And then sometimes it's like, hey, there's more here. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes people just have to experience, and there are lots of ways to experience it. Now, about 10% of people are not suggestible. And does that mean they can't change? No, it doesn't mean that at all, because if someone was absolutely not suggestible, we couldn't learn. It's how we learn. But for about 10% of people, it's just simply not as effective as others. And what I uncovered in the paper that I wrote last week, summarizing these articles, is that there are people out there who have done work to use brainwave entrainment using theta to facilitate someone being able to enter the theta state, which they then in turn found they were slightly more suggestible. It was statistically significant. It wasn't great, but it was statistically significant. So, if you find that you're someone, you listen to hypnosis audios and you're not seeing any change, find some theta tones on YouTube, 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week for 2 or 3 weeks, and then do the hypnosis audios and see if that influences things, changes it.
That's a great tip. That's a really great takeaway that somebody can do. I love that. So how does using this insightfulness and this hypnosis and this suggestibility, how does this all help your clients or anybody listening? How can this help them really achieve their goals or help them to do X, Y, and Z that they really want to do, but they just haven't been able to do that?
Right. So typically on a first session when I work with a client, we do some identity work. And I don't always necessarily call it identity work. I ask them, what is the outcome that you want? And what does that look like? Who do you need to be to get that? So if they say I need to be more confident, I'm like, tell me what more confident looks like. Because what confidence looks like to me, what it looks like to you is going to be totally different for someone else. And they will begin to describe me the things that they think and the things that they do and the things that they believe about themselves. And I listen for cues. They'll say like, well, I would be able to get on camera and I would be able to do Facebook Lives, but, and when they say the but, it's like, okay, here's something coming after this. I'll note this is a false belief here. There's something there that we need to address. And there are a few ways to do it. We can do it conversationally, where if I notice they're having a lot of these moments where they get into but, and there's emotion coming up, or there are little hints from the subconscious, little eruptions of emotion or looking away, then I can ask them a question in that moment to begin to shift that belief, to see where that came from. And we can just literally begin unraveling that belief right then and there. Or we can do a formal session where we literally connect with the feeling or we connect with the belief, and tapping into the subconscious, we follow that belief, that misperception, that misinterpretation back to its origins. And we use the benefit of our adult awareness, our consciousness, to shift that belief. Because for almost 100% of my clients, they're like, I know I shouldn't feel this way. I know I'm successful. I know that I'm lovable, but I don't feel lovable. I know that I'm worthy of, creating this next thing in my business, but I just keep holding back because a part of me says I don't deserve it. Well, we're going to go find what's causing you to feel like you don't deserve it, and we are going to correct that belief. So again, when we can get that insight in that moment, and you can have that aha, it's like, oh, this is what's causing me to hold back. No. This isn't true. And I let them inform themselves. Whereas with traditional hypnosis, through a script, we're delivering, guiding, telling new ways to think. Right? And this is why sometimes if you do audios, you have to go through a lot of audios before you find one that works, because on some level, the suggestions being given might not resonate. And that may be why they not stick. It's not that you're not going into hypnosis. It's just that you haven't found the right thing that's turning the key in the lock. Whereas when you do insight-based hypnosis, or you're following subconscious cues, you're just drilling right in.
Ooh.
Reframe that.
Yeah. So do you do most of your work online or do you do things in person? How do you usually connect with people?
Yeah, I'm 100, I would say 100% virtual, but this year I've had a few opportunities where I have actually traveled and met my clients at their location, and I have worked with them one-on-one in person on some things, which is really nice to do because I miss the in-person component, most definitely. But yeah, I'm virtual. If you know anyone in Antarctica, that's the one continent I have left to add to my list. So I'll do a free session with anybody in Antarctica just to say I've hit all 7 continents.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So if you're watching this, hook her up with somebody in Antarctica. Okay. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think there's so much to be said for, how the pandemic kind of changed everything and we went all, virtual and on this and now, we're kind of going back to in-person events, but I think there's still a lot to be gained that you can still get from working with people through online
Yeah,
virtually. There's so many different ways that you can do it now. But I don't think anything will ever replace being in person ever,
yeah,
especially with the energy exchange that you can have when you're in person with somebody. But
yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. But with the subconscious, it's interesting how we can anchor changes to a place. So think about PTSD. You
Yeah.
anchor something negative to a certain place.
Yeah.
When working virtually and you experience the changes, you're experiencing your changes in your home.
Hmm.
It's not something that happened at the hypnotist office.
Uh-huh.
And when I leave, it's gone.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You know what that makes me want to ask you another question now. So, is there would you ever suggest like an optimal location for conducting a session based on what the person has going on? Would you say that that's something to consider?
Yeah, so they need to be in a place where one, they have privacy so
Hmm.
that they can open up and say whatever needs to be said and not worry about someone in the room overhearing them, someone in the next room. And just like to just be really comfortable chair, a couch. Once in a while, I have clients who want to lay down, but I just don't find that conducive. I think that sitting up is better, but yeah, I had a client once who was a couple of minutes late for the session, and when they turned on Zoom, I'm like, "Where are you? Where are you?" It's like, "I'm in
Uh-huh.
the Kroger parking lot," and I'm like, "The
Oh,
Kroger parking lot? How come you're there?" "Well, I was running late and I have to get to my office. I have a legal brief to do. So I thought we would just do the session in the parking lot and then I could go." And I'm like, "Absolutely not."
yeah,
Because I knew what I had planned for the day.
yeah.
I knew where we needed to go, and it was going to be emotional. But number two, I have no idea where you are in this city. And if somebody wanted to come out and smash the window of your car, because you're going to have your eyes closed, you're going to be focused on me. Even if I could see the shadow of what's happening, I couldn't intervene and stop it.
Mhm.
So that's one piece. And then I have a really funny story. I had a client once, she was in San Diego and she lived on a busy street. So when we would connect, she cleaned out a space in her walk-in closet,
Uh-huh.
so we would do the sessions from a walk-in closet. So like the third or fourth session, I'm hearing this yelling and screaming, and then it kind of went away. And then a few minutes later, there's all this yelling and screaming. I finally said, I apologize. I'm just going to stop you for a moment. I said, "Are you safe?"
Uh-huh.
"Oh, yeah, they yell and scream out on the street all the time." I'm like, "Okay, good." And we continued. And then she told me after the session, she said, "Knowing that you were paying attention to what was going on around me allowed me to relax and go so deep. I didn't feel like I had to hang on to everything that was going on in my environment." So, to the degree that I can,
Mhm.
I'm very much aware of what happens in my client's background environment. We've had dogs come in the room. I've had a cat climb up on somebody's lap, and the only thing I could see in their webcam on their laptop was the kitty's tail is up, and I'm getting a full moon view, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, cat, please just don't shut off the computer with your little paws on the keyboard." And
Yeah.
you just roll with it. You just
Yeah.
roll with it. We can't be attached to things that makes us unhappy.
Yeah. But I think that too brings up a good point about environment and about kind of what we become accustomed to when somebody from another perspective comes in and they're like, wow, like that's really distracting. Like, how are you dealing with that every day? But we just numb ourselves to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But so often that stuff is the things that are holding us back or keeping us stuck. These environmental things that we've just become accustomed to, and that another reason why it's so great to work with somebody who can point those out to you.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and if you're paying attention to like the environment and stuff, like, and you hear people screaming like, what's going on over there? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So any parting words or anything like exciting you have coming up this year that you want people to know about? Tell us.
Well, the one thing that I've done this year is I have added a rolling mastermind to what I do. It's a hybrid one-on-one and group. And, for people who just know that they have these beliefs that need to be shifted and want that support throughout the year, and the benefit of being in a group and knowing that, what, I'm not the only business owner dealing with this.
Yeah.
So that's something new. It took me a while to be convinced that I could help people get the change that they want at the level that I believe they deserve it in a group setting. And so this is something I've spent a lot of time to create. So that's what I'm excited about. And I just feel really optimistic around 2023 in general. I know a lot of people are worried about it, but it depends on where we put our attention. There's no news in my house, none of that stuff. I mean, I pay attention to things, but I'm focused on what I'm creating. And for everybody listening, I encourage you to focus on the good that you're creating and you're bringing into the world. And yes, things are going to happen, but also to focus on your resourcefulness to adapt and to move through that, whatever that is, because your awareness around your thoughts really is everything.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a great like ending message for today is, yeah, your awareness around your thoughts, it creates your reality, and it physically impacts you, it mentally impacts you. And I know you and I both are about holistic wellness, holistic everything. And that is such a huge part of it when it comes to your health, when it comes to your mindset, your business, all of that. It is so important. So thank you for sharing that with us, and make sure you take the trash out at the end of the day.
Exactly.
That is our
Exactly.
only takeaway from today. So thank you. So if you're catching this kind of towards the end, definitely Penny gave us some really great insight about hypnosis and how to use it to transform your life, transform your business. So definitely go back when you have time later on, right? That's what's great about video. You can always go back and watch it whenever you want. Just because we're live doesn't mean that we disappear. It'll be here. And definitely, if you found it helpful, share it with somebody, share it with another business owner, share with another person that you care about in your life, that this can really help them. And Penny gave us some really great actionable things that we can start doing today to improve our mindset, improve our reality, and to start just becoming more insightful and self-aware. Would you agree? Did I get it?
This has
Wrap
been a
it?
great conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Penny. I really, really appreciate it. And I think we're going to wrap it up for today. So, like I always say, for a balanced life, just add spice. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks, Penny.